What's up, Journey students? Today we're talking about stop trying to earn God's grace. We have a good friend of mine, Shane Sauls. We've known each other for about 7 years. We worked together at the Blake House for close to 3. Just really excited to have him with us today. My name is Luke Milam. I am the youth pastor at First Baptist Church of Bremen, Georgia, and we make these videos to help encourage and inspire you to live out the Great Commission 7 days a week. Shane, before we get started in some of the questions, would you mind just kind of filling us in what you do at the Blake House, letting the audience know, because some of them may not know that much about it or may not know anything about it.
My name is Shane, and I am teaching inner healing, and I am over the SLTs, but overall, the Blake House, what it is, we're a 10-month minimum drug and alcohol program for men that struggle with addiction. And so, we take guys in and we house them for 10 months. Our mission there is really we want to be that place of refuge for men that struggle with addiction, and really just bring them in and allow Christ to regenerate them, reestablish things in them, spiritually, mentally, and physically. And so as far as what I do there, I am over our fundraising. I'm the director of fundraising and public relations. So I do a lot with our community. I am the face for our community, for the Blake House. And so I spend a lot of time in the community and developing relationships with our community, which I tell you, man, our community is amazing. We get so much support from them, but yeah, that's really what we do. And
I absolutely love the Blake House. Again, I worked there for about 3 years. One of the things that I noticed with the guys that I interacted with is they just want somebody to love them. They want that reassurance that they haven't gone too far, that they can get a little bit back of what they want. They desire to have a family again, to have a good job, all these different things. And the Blake House does a fantastic job of healing those hurts, but also presenting them Jesus, because at the end of the day, nothing can fill that void outside of Jesus Christ. Shane, if you would, give us a little bit of background into your life. Did you grow up in church? Did you grow up in a Christian home?
I did. I actually, I grew up from a pretty normal home, I guess, whatever we want to call normal. I didn't come working at the Blake House. You hear a lot of stories. You hear a lot of the guys' stories. And it can kind of, when you start hearing their stories, it can really paint you a picture of possibly why they ended up, at the Blake House. And you kind of can say, and have an understanding of why they probably ended up there. And so I remember when I got to the Blake House and I started hearing some of these guys' story, I'm like, man, this doesn't sound like me. But I did, because I grew up in a I guess what you would say Christian home. My parents were both married. My parents took us to church. I would say more so, if we want to categorize the spiritual leader in my home, it was my mother. It wasn't really my dad. My dad did a lot of doing things to appease my mom, but he wasn't really the head and the spiritual leader in our home. But we did. My mom took us to church. She was very involved in church. She was very involved in the community. So I did. I came from, like I said, some guys, you hear their stories and they're broken homes or abusive homes, and whether it's mentally, physically, and I didn't come from that. But as I got older and started, learning some things at the Blake House and looking into some things, it started showing me that I had, through my journey at the Blake House, or in my life as a young kid, there were some things being instilled into me unintentionally, and belief systems that I was processing and starting to take on that caused me to not necessarily be able to live out, the life that really this God that I've been able to discover by going to the Blake House had in store me, So
Hmm.
I was able to discover really some of that while I was at the Blake House, this new God that I had discovered.
One of the amazing things about the Blake House, I think you were on the trip. It was the very first trip I took the Blake House on when I was doing the outdoor adventure ministry. Hearing some of the different stories and backgrounds of the different people, because growing up, I was in this really tight bubble. I thought, well, as long as, everybody should be in this bubble. But on going on that trip, it opened my eyes that there were some people that probably would have been in the same bubble that I was in, but they were at the Blake House. And that really opened my eyes to, we are all one step away from going in a different direction. If we get off of our track of where God wants us, we're one step off from going in a completely different direction and going and doing something that we didn't really have any dream or fantasy of going in that direction. Here in the background and knowing a little bit about your story and different things, what was that point that really changed your view of God's grace?
I would just say, just to kind of help people understand, I struggled with addiction for a good part of 20 years. And I had gone into, back then it was a different name. It was No Longer Bound West Georgia. But I had gone into their program in 2007, did the 10 months, graduated, came back into life and back home to my family. Within that first year, I had ventured back into my addiction and started using again, and ended up going back down that road of addiction for about 3.5 more years before I came back
Hmm.
to the Blake House in 2011. I can just tell you, Luke, that the shame and guilt that I was experiencing in that time, having to humble myself and say, you know what, I've got to go get some help again. It was pretty rough. It was pretty intense as far as shame and guilt. And I just remember for the first couple of months of me being back into the program, how intense that was, and how much of it that I was. Believe me, I didn't want to feel it, but God was just allowing me to feel the shame and guilt. And along that time frame, I just remembered like not wanting to forgive myself, not being able to even think about how was I going to forgive myself, and what I was putting my family through and what I was putting my kids through. And just along the way and along those next few months, just being able to experience, through other people telling me they forgive me, and
Right.
telling me that, I'm forgiven. I started to understand and see a little bit of this thing called grace that God has for us. And it was through people and through experiences that I started to experience some of that grace that he offers us, to allow me to start to forgive myself again for the things that I had done, and the relationships that I had damaged, and my relationship with God that I felt like I had damaged that was unrepairable. And
Hmm.
he started to show me that, there was nothing I could ever do. It didn't matter how far down I ever went, or because there were some things I was doing that were pretty bad, but he started to show me that there's no scale, son.
Hmm.
We can take away that scale, and that he just loved me no matter how dark I made it or how much darkness I created. He started to show me that it didn't matter. He still loved me, and he still cared for me. And he offered that grace to me. And so that was probably when I started experiencing some of that grace. Now, if I'm honest, sometimes I don't always live there all the time. If I'll be a little vulnerable. Sometimes I cannot even live in it, and still have some of that old belief system that I have. But I know it today, and I know that it's there, and I know that it's real. I think that's where I have to choose, and I have to make that choice to receive his grace, which is good.
Wow. Well, thank you for telling us a little bit about your testimony. We're making these videos about for students. What would you tell students in relation to Easter coming up about God's grace?
I mean, I guess I would just say that, the normalcy of maybe that things have happened, I guess, in this time of the year, up until this year. Maybe our surroundings have changed, and maybe the way that we're going to do it this year is going to change. But I think just understanding and realizing that God is still God, and it doesn't matter. And I know we hear this a lot, and it can be cliche, but like, God's still the same God today. He's still the same God yesterday, and he's going to be the same tomorrow. Whether we get to experience Easter the way that we've always experienced it, we can still experience God. That is what Easter is about. That never changes, and that has never changed. And our circumstances may look different. The way we're doing it this year may look different, but again, God's not different. Jesus is not different. Jesus is still the same. I think just holding on to that, no matter what the circumstances, situation looks like this year, just holding on to the truth that our God doesn't change. Jesus doesn't change. Jesus' love for us is the same, and we can hold on to that no matter what it looks like circumstantially.
Well, thank you, Shane, for joining us today. It has been a pleasure. As always, Journey students, it's all about Jesus. We are excited to offer you these videos. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. We just want to let you know that if there's anything out there that the Journey Student Ministry can do for you, let us know, and we will do our best to meet that need. Thank you, and God bless.